Hey, you guys, this book is called 1 Minute Bedtime Stories by Sherry Lewis, and it's illustrated by Art Cummings. And this book I want to dedicate to Ollie. He and I read some of these stories together the last time he visited. So I wanted to read it again and let him be able to see it online as well. So Ollie, Grandma Gabbie wants you to enjoy these stories all over again. This story is called Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan was the hero of many American tall tales. They say that Paul weighed 50 pounds when he was born. Do you know what you weighed at birth? I bet it was at least 40 pounds less than Paul Bunyan. Paul was supposed to have stood 147 axe handles tall. An axe handle is about 3 feet long, so that would have made him 441 feet tall. Since Paul was a genuine giant, he wanted to do a big job, so he invented logging. He worked his way west, clearing the forests of America so that the country had enough lumber to build homes and cities across the new land. He had many lumberjacks working for him who were huge men with gigantic appetites. They all had to be fed, so we built a cooking grill that was 24 city blocks long and 18 blocks wide. The smokestack on his stove was so tall that he had to hinge it so that the moon could pass by. The cook had to ride a big bucking bronco to get from one end of the grill to the other, and it took a team of farm horses to pull the wagon holding the salt and pepper across the table. Paul had 200 cooks cooking for him day and night, but they couldn't turn over enough pancakes to feed all the lumberjacks. So Paul put a piece of popcorn into each flapjack, and when they were cooked on one side, they popped up into the air and flipped themselves. The Emperor's New Clothes. Once there was an emperor who was very vain. 2 men came to his castle one day and told him they could weave very beautiful clothing that could not be seen by silly folks, but only by wise people. The emperor, pleased that these men thought he was a wise person, paid them lots of money to weave him such a special suit of clothes. The men pretended to weave, but really they only moved their hands back and forth through thin air and made believe they were working late into the night. At last, they brought this so-called finished suit of clothes to the emperor. He could see nothing, of course, but pretended to step into the pants and button up the jacket so he would not be thought a silly fool. Then he ordered a great parade. The people who were lined up along the streets could not see the emperor's new clothes either, but not wanting to be thought fools, they would not admit it until one surprised little child called out to his father, "Daddy, the emperor has nothing on." When the emperor heard the child, he knew it was true. Embarrassed, he ran all the way back to his castle, but by then the dishonest men were gone, the money was gone, and the emperor was left with a suit of clothes that never existed in the first place. Rumpelstiltskin. A miller who liked to brag met the king. He said, "Your Majesty, I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold." So the king, who liked to have gold, locked the miller's daughter into a room filled with straw and a spinning wheel, and said, "If you can spin this straw into gold by morning, you'll be my queen. If not, you'll die." The girl, who'd like to live, began to cry, but suddenly a little man appeared and said, "If I spin your straw into gold, will you give me your firstborn child?" To stay alive, the girl had to give her promise to the little man. He spun the straw into gold and disappeared. The king, thrilled, made the miller's daughter his queen, and a year later they had a son. When the little man came to take the child, the queen was heartbroken, and so he said, "If you can find out what my name is, you may keep your son." The queen sent out a messenger who roamed the countryside and returned to the castle and said, "In the forest, I just saw a funny little man leaping around a campfire chanting, 'Queen is a mess. Now isn't that a shame? That she will never guess Rumpelstiltskin is my name.'" So, when the little man appeared, the queen said, "Is your name Rumpelstiltskin?" That made Rumpelstiltskin so mad, he stamped his foot right through the floor and disappeared forever. Rip Van Winkle. A long, long time ago, in the mountains town of Sleepy Hollow, the old men would get together to tell tales about the magic to be found in the mountains that surrounded them. Among these old fellows was Rip Van Winkle. His story began on a morning many years ago when he'd set off with his dog for a day of hunting. In a clearing in the woods, he came upon a group of tiny men with long white beards playing nine pins, which is something like bowling. They invented They invited Rip to play, and he did. Between his turns at rolling the ball, he joined the tiny men as they drank wine from a wooden cask. After several drinks, he fell asleep. When he awoke, he discovered that his clothes had turned into rags, his gun was rusted, his dog was gone, and he himself had grown a beard that was so long it fell all the way to the ground. Puzzled, he returned home only to find that his little boy had become a big man, and everyone he had ever known was either dead or grown old. Rip realized that he'd been asleep for 20 years. Of course, he searched for those tiny men, but he never saw them again. But when the sound of thunder echoed through the valley, he would say it was the crash of their balls striking the nine pins, and they played hidden in a way. It was the crashing of their balls striking the nine pins as they played. But when the sound of thunder echoed through the valley, he would say it was the crash of their balls striking the nine pins as they played, hidden away somewhere high in the mountains. The Baker's Daughter. Once there was a baker who had two daughters, one kind, generous, and pleasant, the other selfish, greedy, and cross. One cold evening, the good-natured daughter was in the shop when a poor, old, ragged woman came in and begged for a bit of bread. "Certainly, Granny," said the girl, and put some dough in the oven to bake. But when she opened the door to take it out, the loaf had doubled in size. "And so shall it always be for you, because of your generous heart," said the old woman, who was really a fairy in disguise. And from then on, everything the baker's daughter put in the oven came out twice as large. Time went on, and one evening, the ill-natured daughter was working in the shop when the same old woman came in and asked for the bread. Grudgingly, the girl put a tiny piece of dough in the oven, but found, when she took it out, that the loaf had doubled in size and was shiny with raisins and sugar. "That's too large and fine for her," the girl thought, and quickly hid the bread. But the old woman, who had been pretending to sleep, woke up and asked if her bread was done. "It burned up in the oven," laughed the girl. "And so shall it always be for you," cried the fairy. "Henceforth, you shall say nothing but ba, ba." And with those words, The girl turned into a goat and clattered out the door. See the goat? This story is called The Big Family and the Little House. Once there was a poor man who had many troubles. So we went to a wise man in the town and begged for help. My wife, my father, my 6 children, and I all live crowded together in a tiny little house. We trip and bump into each other all day, have little room to sleep, and no privacy. What shall I do? The wise man considered a moment and then said, "How many animals do you have in your barn?" "A cow, a goat, a pig, and some chickens," the man answered. "Good. Go home and take all of the animals into the house with you," the wise man said. The poor man was surprised, but he did as he was told. And the following day he was back. "What a terrible thing you have had me do," he said. "The animals What a terrible thing you have had me do," he said. "The animals are into everything. They have turned the house into a dirty barn. They have eaten our food, and we have had to sleep standing up." The wise man thought again and said, "Now go home and take the animals out of the house." The poor man hurried home and did so. The next day, he was back smiling. "With the animals out of the house, it seems quiet and peaceful now," he said. "And with no animals around, it is so clean. And my wife and children, my father, and I have much more room in which to eat and sleep. Thank you for helping us. I'd give anything to be as clever as you are." As you are wondering why this and why that, did you ever think how strange it is that you have to wash your hands before you eat while cats wash after meals? Did you know, in fact, that cats wash after meals? They all do, and here's the reason why. A long time ago, there was a polite pussycat who was proud of having good manners. One day, he caught a sparrow for his dinner. "How do you do?" he said politely to the bird. "Please excuse me for eating you up, but I'm hungry." He was about to pop this bird into his mouth and eat it, feathers and all, when suddenly the sparrow spoke. "My dear sir, a real gentleman does not eat without washing his hands and face. If you really were a courteous cat with fine manners, you'd wash first, too." The cat thought what the bird had said. The cat thought about what the bird had said, and he agreed. He put down the sparrow and began to lick his paws and rub them over his whiskers. But the minute he let go of the bird, it flew away, and the cat had to do without dinner. Well, he was so mad at being tricked by that spunky sparrow that he said, "Gentlemen or no gentleman, as long as I live, I will eat first and wash afterward." That is what he taught all his children to do, and that is what all cats do to this very day. The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Once upon a time, packs of hungry wolves roamed the hills. This was a problem for the lone shepherds who guarded their sheep but were unable to save them when the wolves attacked. So one day the shepherds held a meeting. They decided that if one of them should spy a wolf coming out of the shadows, he would call, "Wolf, wolf," and the others would come running with clubs and noisemakers to frighten the animals away. However, one shepherd boy thought it would be a funny joke if he were to call, "Wolf, wolf," during the night when everyone was asleep. And so he did. Of course, everyone came running in their pajamas and bathrobes and nightcaps and with sleep in their eyes, all ready for trouble. But there was no trouble. And when the other shepherds realized that they had been awakened for a joke, they grumbled a lot and shook their fists angrily at the prankster. Unfortunately, the next night, a pack of wolves really did attack that young shepherd's. Unfortunately, the next night, a pack of wolves really did attack the young shepherd's flock. In panic, he stood on a high rock and cried, "Wolf! Wolf!" But the other shepherds, not wanting to be made fools of again, merely turned over and went back to sleep. No one came to help the shepherd boy, who lost all his sheep that night because he had cried wolf just for the fun of it. Please make sure to let me know which one's your favorite in the comment section below.